The fun challenge of a theory is to take an event that happened and use those facts about what happened, and then devise a theory about how what happened happened. It's kind of fun. I've decided to work on the theory of how this happened. This is Woodstock 1969, and I'm interested in finding out how this happened. How did this happen in the middle of August when school is getting ready to start? These are all younger generation people. And how did this whole thing happen? So I'm going to be interested in this. I always recommend that somebody look for a topic that's interesting rather than something that sounds easy. It's going to be the same amount of work, whether it's easy or whether it's just because I'm interested in it. So logically, why not pick something that sounds interesting or personal or that a person cares about rather than something that seems easy? If I pick something that seems easy, in the middle of doing all the work, I'm going to get resentful because I don't want to learn about this. Whereas if I just pick something that fascinates me in the first place, I'm going to be in good shape. Let's see where the starting point is. The first phase is just brainstorming. I do this in boxes. Some people use circles. Some people jot it down on legal pads. Some people just sit down and start typing words. I've seen people who write it in HTML code, whatever it takes to just brainstorm. I'm trying to find a formula for my essay. So I'm just throwing stuff in here. Next step, there's a book I read several years ago called The Tipping Point. And that book is another theory by Malcolm Gladwell about how it is that certain products, ideas, events hit that tipping point where they just sail off way above anything that was expected. So the first thing I need to do is get a copy of that, and I'm just going to get this PDF so that I can quote from the PDF. It's a perfectly good way of getting the textbook. So I'm going to get that first. Next, I'm going to get an interview with Malcolm Gladwell so I can hear from his own mouth what this tipping point thing is. Now, if I was writing an essay and I didn't have any idea of what a formula might be, then I might get started finding the facts of the event or the whatever it is that happened, and then see what I came upon during that research process to see if a formula came to me in something that I'm writing about, or somebody had some speculation about how this or that happened. I just happened to have read this book and I thought it was a good explanation. It's a good formula. Okay, so I have jotted down my outline. Of course, naturally I misspelled something. Okay, so this is the basic gist of my outline. And that is, having studied the tipping point, I find out that the tipping point, the factors are the power of context, the law of the few, connectors, and the stickiness factor. Then for my spiritual theory, and again, at the beginning of my project, I don't know this spiritual theory. I've got to work on that, and you'll see that as we go through this. But when I look at the basic thing, this would just be B, 1, 2, and 3. Whatever I found in the rule of 3 to support whatever spiritual theory I come up with, because there really is going to be no way to explain this other than to leave this planet, which sort of the age of Aquarius, which is the time period of the whole event. And so I like to do that sometimes. I think it's fun to go up into the ethereal and start thinking that way. It's a fun thing to do. And then I have the conclusion. And as is the question with everything in a theory, the question comes, so what? So this is the theory of how Woodstock 1969 happened. So what? If I was doing the theory of how the Nazis, and I have to take a very narrowed view, if I wanted to look at why the Nazi commanders did what they did, the reason for that is pretty obvious, isn't it? To make sure it never happened again. if I wanted to look at something else and I had a theory about why that happened, that would be important, wouldn't it? It would be to make sure this doesn't happen again, to have a theory about over-medicating people and why that's happening in one specific sector. Obviously, that theory would be to make sure that it doesn't keep happening. But we've got Woodstock. We've got a sociological event that happened. So what? Well, that's going to be my challenge, and that's why I add that to my sections. Now, is this where I end the outline? Heavens no. That's just the beginning. It just gives me a place to come back to as I go along. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to start researching and just finding everything I can find. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to do that at the same time I create the proposal that's going to be due. Now, the instructor should know that the proposal is not going to contain conclusions because I haven't researched everything yet. I may change my focus, I may change my theory, depending upon what I find. But the proposal shows the professor the intent. And of course, I have a template to go by, so I'm going to go by that template. And I'm going to start with an image that I may or may not use. This is the image that's been used and associated with Woodstock. Can I get permission to use that as a title image? I don't know yet, but I'm going to use it for the proposal. And I've given it just a working title. I'll promise you at the end of this, this is not the final title of this essay. Spoiler alert. So I'm going to go through and as I'm researching, I know what my purpose is. And so I find it fascinating that at this point, the largest spectator group at a popular outdoor festival had been 50,000 spectators. And somehow we went from 50,000 spectators to, we finally find out later on that the total number of people coming to, attempting to get to, at, around, in the woods, by, camping out in the town nearby, on the highways, coming down from Canada, coming across the country from California, coming across the Midwest, across the Great Lakes. That total number is 4 million in the middle of summer in a tiny little town in upstate New York. I'm interested. Then I have my thesis statement, and that is something that I do need to create so that I can stick to my formula. And this changes just a little bit at the bottom because I haven't done my theory yet. At the time I write my proposal, I have not yet completed my theory. So you'll see as we go through that my theory changes, and when my theory changes, this little bit of it changes a little bit. But here's my theory, here's my structure. Despite the wreck and ruin of an upstate New York county, a study of the tipping point criteria of law of the few, stickiness factor, power of context, and connectors presents an explanation of Woodstock, the unexpected cataclysmic success of the most influential cultural event of the 20th century. Now, you're going to see when we go through the essay that the order of these things changes. We go from the law of the few to the connectors to the, we start with the power of context, then we go to the law of the few, then we go to connectors, and then the stickiness factor. So this thesis statement is going to change just a little bit in the final draft. But for now, this gives the instructor an idea of my proposal and how I'm going to move forward. Then we have the broad topic, which is 1969 Woodstock Festival promoters town who signed on the provisions for the event and the management of the crowd. And then the narrowed focus, how did the small upstate New York town concert become an iconic phenomenon? Using information from the tipping point, a section of the essay would involve the law of the few, stickiness factor, and we need to add on right here the connectors. Okay, and then we have research method proposal, interviews with promoters, statistics, analysis of communication methods, transportation analysis, interviews with attendees. I ended up with so much more than just this list. But this was written before all of my completed research. But the proposal is due so much way before the essay. Then my proposed outcome is going to be a theory. I don't know what the theory is yet. I haven't written the essay. Okay, so piece and music. All right, so now I've started my Work Cited, my bibliography, and remember, you do not have to use EasyBib. You can write a Work Cited page all by yourself using the textbook. There are instructions on YouTube. There are instructions in an MLA handbook. If you want to create a citation page from scratch, you are welcome to do that. I prefer EasyBib because it's going to do all the formatting for me. And I've started off with an example of each of those types of research that I'm going to be using. I should put the actual text for the tipping point here, shouldn't I? I didn't do that, did I? Wait. Oh, I had all that. I don't know. This fire festival, at the beginning of the project, I thought, well, there could be a little comparative work with the fire festival. I never ended up using it. I never ended up doing it. But it was like on my brainstorming list. So since I was thinking about it, I put it in my bibliography. I took it out later. Okay, then I have the history of it. This is some of the interviews and so forth. All right. So there's my proposal. And that I start when I start my research, so it's out of my way. Once I get the proposal off my screen, I'm perfectly happy. I put up here at the very start what I'm going to need. I'm going to need a graph that shows this whole thing, and I know I'm never going to find it on the internet. I can search for a year and a half, and I am never going to find a graph that is going to give me what I need to show the reader. So I immediately write this. I contact these little math wizards, and I give them the idea for a challenge, and that takes me to a place called Omni, and Omni is where I was able to get the research conducted in order to create the graph, which I will show you a little later. Okay, so now I've done my research, and you can just see I'm copy and pasting. This is an interview, and whenever I transcribe an interview, I'm going to add the timestamps, and that helps me if I'm going to cite that interview to find where it was in that particular interview. Okay, let me show you something really quick, because I know you're thinking, how did you get all this? How did you get this? Well, let me show you. This is an excellent, what a find. I'm just tinkering around in YouTube, and all of a sudden this comes up, this Cronkite CBS News report that took place Monday the 18th, right after the festival. Oh, what a find. Let me show you how to do that. So I just type in, just to get started, Woodstock 1969 interviews. And then I just see what comes up. I've seen the film, the movie Woodstock, and of course I'm going to watch that. And I streamed that on, I believe it was Primetime, where I streamed the director's cut. This girl makes me nuts. I never could understand why she is in that movie. I'm not going to use that interview. I don't think she has anything to share that I'm going to want to hear. So I'm going to scroll through here, and I'm going to find some interviews that might be able to help me, and that's going to help me focus, right? So this is the one that I streamed. I didn't stream it on YouTube. I streamed it on Primetime. Okay, so I'm just looking through here, and I'm just at that phase of writing things. Now, when I watched that movie, okay, let's just go through one of these interviews. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to show you a tough example to cite. This is an interview from this guy when Wavy Gravy and Hugh Romney and his team showed up. These were to be the security guards for the festival, and it's going to be a very important part of my essay. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to click on it. And when I click on it, let me just pause it. I zoom down here like this, and this gives me the transcript. And there is the transcript with all of its little timestamps. So I can either scroll through here and get what I know I'm going to need, or I can just be quick about it and just copy and paste the whole thing. Got it? So that's how I get that. I have lots of notes that I took from Woodstock and back again, all of which are misspelled and a mess, but I'm going to go ahead and put them down anyway, and I have where they take place. And then from Woodstock Director's Cut, I make sure, because I don't want to have to go back and do this, I'm watching it on prime time. If I find something, I pause and I write down the timestamp, and then I type it out, and it's going to be a mess, but I don't care. Right? So I go through here, and anything I see that I think I'm going to use, I pause it. And you can see this is Arlo Guthrie. You can see I'm just typing a million miles an hour, just getting stuff down. I'll fix the spelling later. Okay, and then it's what I'm doing. I'm just going back and forth and back and forth. Now you're saying, what are all these colors for? Well, these colors, whenever I use something, I'm going to copy it and I'm going to color code it so I know I used it. And it comes in so handy. So let's go over here and look at what the outline looks like when I cut and paste research information into the outline. Now I took that short jotted out outline, the little short one, and I'm going to copy and paste. I wish I could use this picture. I can't. I couldn't get permission for it. This is a collage that somebody did, so I had to find something different. Darn it. It's kind of a neat picture. Okay, so here's my introduction. And this is something that I wrote, so I have the stuff that I wrote. And then here is a quote. And here's what I did in citing quotes. I have so many references to films. Woodstock from there and back, Woodstock here and again, Woodstock, the history of. I have so many titles that they would just take up so much room that I just went with the director. Now, if I had a professor, if I was doing this for a master's thesis or something, I would ask my committee director if it was going to be okay for me to do that, to just, instead of having this long citation that shows Woodstock Director's Cut, Wadley, so long, can I just cut it down to whoever the director was of these various and sundry Woodstock things? It's just going to, okay, so this is where you can just see I've cut and pasted from my research, and I added it where it goes in the outline. That way I'm never lost. Okay, so you can see I've put in yellow what my words are, and the outline is not going to be a perfect masterpiece, but it's going to give me a template. And there is my thesis statement again. And on we go. Definition section. And the definition section ends up, let me find a more current outline. This one is one that was saved a while back. Let me find a better one. Let's do something to show you a good idea of how this outline looks. And hold on. Look at the information that is included in this introduction. There is no way on earth that all of this information is going to be one paragraph. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make 3 paragraphs. And I'm going to include this information in the 3 paragraphs, and in the 3rd paragraph is where I'm going to place this thesis statement. So this is, the yellow is in my own words. The green, or whatever color I put it in there, comes in and is added. Okay? Now, the second section of any essay, as you know, needs to define terms. If I'm talking about the theories of epilepsy, then the second section, obviously, of the essay needs to tell the reader what is epilepsy. You can assume that the reader's heard of it but doesn't know anything really about it. So I am thinking about with Woodstock, what was happening at the time as the factual basis for how in the world did this happen. So I noticed that in Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, the power of context is one of the tipping point ideas. So that's why we start with the power of context. And I have the location, I have this information about the promoters and their dream, I have the power of the context in the environment, and this is a quote that I'm going to use part of, and then we're going to come down to the factors that are involved. You see I'm using his picture twice, so that's going to come out of there. But the outline is where I'm making sure that my structure is complete and that I'm not repeating myself. This is that graph I told you about. So I got these little folks over there at Omni. I'll bring that up. My math wizards said that they could not, there was no way to calculate how this could happen. And I used that statement in my essay, that it's really impossible to calculate how this kind of a rise could happen. So down here in my explanation of figure 1, these totals are estimations based on reports, aerial images, and sales, and include patrons within the venue, outside the venue, and en route to the venue. So I just included 10 of the top festivals, and I included Newport, Trips, Monterey Pop, Schaefer, Miami Pop, Palm Springs Pop, Detroit Rock Festival, Rock Revival, Woodstock, Altamont Free Concert, which was just 3 months after Woodstock, and the Isle of Wight, which sometimes brags that it had a larger crowd than Woodstock. I think not. Anyway, this is the wow factor of the essay, and this I hope will allow the reader to see. I'm all about the reader. I want the reader to never have to stop reading, to never have to think about anything, and I want them to be interested. So the placement of this graph is a challenge because it's got to go in just the right place. Let's go back to the outline. So you can see that the outline is just where I can place things, I can place information, and when I work on the rough draft, I'm going to polish all this up. But I want to make sure that I have everything in the place where it goes, because it's very easy to get lost in an essay if I don't keep track of everything. And so this is going to be the last section, which is my theory. And then the law of the few is over here, and we take each one of the connectors. We take the whole thing is organized. And I'll add this on with the essay so you can just sort of see. It's a mess, and it's supposed to be a mess. And that's the idea of an outline. And the outline should be filled out. It should not necessarily be a thing of beauty. And unless you have an instructor that requires an outline that is a thing of beauty, then it can be messy like this. But you can see where I've distinguished everything and where, and it's all documented so that I don't know what all this was in here. I didn't use it all, but you can just see that's the outline. Let's go take a quick look at the rough draft. Here we are in the rough draft, and I have it showed so that you can see the images. And this is the abstract. The abstract is the easiest thing in the world to write because I have listed what each sentence should be. So let's just take a quick look at the abstract. As you know, in the course, the instructions are there for exactly what an abstract is. It should be about 150 words, and this is literally what the sentences should be. The motivation, topic, methods that are to be used, actual results, what did your research reveal, and the conclusion and implications. Now, this needs to be written after I've done all the research, but it only takes a minute to write, and this is what it is. There's the motivation, and you can see everything that's in those 5 steps. It turns out like this big gorgeous, beautiful paragraph that looks so wonderful and was so easy to write. Let's go back to the rough draft. Now, I like headings, particularly when an essay is going to be longer. Why do I like headings? Because I don't ever want my reader to wonder where they are in the essay. I want them to always know exactly where we are and where we're going next. So, this is the introduction, and as you can see, the introduction turned into 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. I add images because this is a sociological essay, and I think my reader will help see the context of what I'm discussing if they can see images. And you can see that each one of those sections of the outline have been added into the essay and cited along the way. Remember that we had decided that the second one was going to be the power of context. And you saw that in the outline. So first of all, the formula is always the same. What does Gladwell say about the power of context? And then the next one, we're going to go down to the next points and the next points. Location, remember where I had location, location, location? That's not the way it shows up in the essay, but this is important because instead of these arenas, the decision was to have it out in nature. And each one of these paragraphs has been developed according to the outline. See how easy life is made when I have an outline to tell me what to do next? And then I don't have to really give a lot of things talk. Now, I mentioned the Vietnam War as a very important piece of the context of the essay. But you notice that I don't include gruesome images. The reason that I don't include gruesome images is because I'm showing young people and what young people are doing at this time, and I don't want my reader to have to stop for a minute and look at something that's not going to advance the narrative. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that I can't ever use an image like that. It's just that for the purposes of this essay, for this theory, nothing serves the theory that has to do with any of the stuff. What I do is talk about the My Lai massacre, which was the thing that was part of the tipping point. That happened in March of 1968, but they couldn't keep it hidden, and the report of it came out in March of 1969, just a few months before the concert. And then in the information that I do include an image for, and you see when I have it like this, I can just move images around a little bit and make them where they fit best. This was something that I thought was important for the context of this particular essay, and I hadn't even thought about it until I was just researching around. But the Beatles had their last concert just months before the festival. And when I think that the Beatles just in the United States were a big deal from 64 until this, and you realize that's just 5 years. But gosh, they were important years. And so when the British invasion's over, now what are we going to do? Right? So that's why I included that image, because it has to do with music. It has to do with young people. It has to do, with the context of the festival. Moving on, then we have, and maybe I overstated this in the essay. I don't know. If I gave it to a committee, they would have to look it over and tell me. But the point is, there were such limitations in how word got out about anything. And so this is the ad that was placed in the Village Voice the week, just the day before the concert. And how did I knew about it? And I lived in Norman, Oklahoma. I was a young kid in Norman, Oklahoma. How did I know about it when there was nothing? So that's this important part of the context, is that these were the only tools that they had to market something. So, and then this is where I put our wow factor. I put it in the context of most everybody. Anytime I use something like that, I always say never use everybody, because everybody is 8 million people or 8 billion people, and I'm not qualified to say who everybody is. So I'm setting up the wow factor of the graph, and so I say most everybody, indicating that it's not everybody in the world, but it's most everybody. And so that's where I put the wow factor. Okay, so that's what we have there. And of course, there's an explanation of the wow factor and how this graph came to be. And I don't want the reader to have to figure out anything by themselves. So I explain to them what I want them to see in this chart, even though it's pretty obvious from the look of the chart. Moving down, when you see a list of things like, somebody says something like $3 trillion. I have no context for that. Do you? Do you have a mental landscape that organizes what 3 trillion looks like? All I see is 3. So it's the same thing when a list, so-and-so was assassinated, so-and-so was assassinated. I put this in there, and this is not a graph that I made up. It's one that I got and cited. But I think it's a neat way of showing these assassinations and when they took place in a timeline. And I like the color of it, and I like the fact that images are included. So it just seemed like a nice addition for the reader to see, because it's important. Now we have the law of the few, and we have the mavens. And again, what do? The same formula. What does the tipping point say? And who are our mavens? And so we have Michael Lang, shown here with Max Yasker, and we talk about his vision, and then we go on to talk about the next maven, which the mavens are the people who are excited about, they have the vision, they have the dream, they have the they have the let's do this concert. And the other maven that I chose was Dale Bell and Michael Wadley, who were the filmmakers. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Woodstock or not, but it's quite a fabulous documentary. And they took the project on 1 week before the festival. And so it was done on a wing and a prayer. And it was done on, if we make this film, we'll own it. Let's go do this. And they had $10,000 between them. And I think that makes them mavens. They are there to tell the story. Now the next section is the connectors. And there are quite a few connectors. Because if somebody doesn't connect, nothing's going to happen. You can have dreamers all day long, but somebody's got to make it happen. So this is where I put the section of people who fit that description. And they're all organized, again, with the formula. And again, same formula. Tipping point. Connector, connector, connector. Same thing. Over here, tipping point. Maven, maven, maven. All right, so. And then we have the people who, I could not find a color picture to save my soul. And so, as much as I like to say all the pictures should be uniform, they should all be framed up the same, they should all be the same color pattern, sometimes, as much as I tried, I could not. And it's important to have these two guys together. They were the financiers. They're the ones who paid the checks. If not for them, nothing would have happened. And so, as much as I hate having to do it, I just had to include a black and white picture. Darn it. Okay, so now you can see that these are the connectors, and there's quite a few of them, these connectors. I saved the most important connectors. Well, not, it's hard to say what was most important, but Chipmunk, the stage announcer, and, we go through this. It's kind of, oops, see, he's out of place. He should be over here. And that's one thing about after I've done all the sentence structures, then if I put it side by side, I can kind of see and play around with images. This is one that I put together all by myself. And this is just another signifier that this is Woodstock, what happened in the rain. And this is the Altamont Festival, 3 months after in December of '69, where this is what happened. This woman is being stabbed to death. These people have all decided to storm the stage. And this is on a perfectly beautiful night. Nothing's happening temperature-wise. So I put that little image together. Because, again, I'm trying to show them the wow factor. The other connector that I show, which is something that I hadn't added in, and I thought, I just have to. If you don't have sound and you don't have people on stage, you can have the greatest little announcers in the world and you can have all the fun, loving people, but if you don't have anything to entertain them, you're in trouble. And so I think this Chris Langhart fact, and I don't like that this is coming in there. Let's see. Oh, I see why it's going to mess everything up. All right, got to leave it there. Okay, Chris Langhart is the guy who created this bridge because their plan was to bring everybody from the hotels where they had them as performers and get the performers to the stage. Well, there was no way to get the performers to the stage because you have 600,000 people here and you have another 1 million people on the highway and you can't get the performers to the stage. And so they have to helicopter them in at the last minute. And that's great. You get them in with the helicopter. Now how are you going to get from the helicopter to the stage? And so at the last minute, Chris Langhart built this little bridge. I think it's fabulous. The next thing is the sound guy. And again, this is 1969. You got to think what the limited resources are. So this is his sound equipment, and they had actually planned for rain. And they had built these in these incredible towers, and they had 28 days to do it. Fascinating. Then we go with the security and how the security is connecting to the audience. And again, I had that picture up here that I already started with, which is what happened at Altamont. And so we show the different strategies in security. And this is the Altamont security team of Hell's Angels. And this is the security team that was selected for Woodstock. And it was Hugh Romney, a.k.a. Wavy Gravy, and his band of 100 hippies who held security tight for that entire festival. It's incredible. And then, okay, so we spent a little time on the security factor because that's very important. And then we have not just him, and this is what took longer than almost everything, and I learned something very important from this. Tom Law is the blonde guy right here who was Wavy Gravy's right-hand man, and it was he who is conducting yoga classes every morning for 600,000 people. And it took so long to find his name. It was incredible. But then I looked at a interview with somebody else, and it shows this picture. I looked down in the comments, and that's where I find his name. And then it was easy to find after that. So some things that you think are going to be easy are hard, and some things that seem hard are going to be really easy. Then I have the stickiness factor, which is what made it stick in the minds of people who might have come. These are the posters, and again, this is an image I put together, of the posters of the time. That's all you had, was posters, radio slots, and newspaper ads. Well, the radio slots are fine if somebody's tuned in right at that moment, but what if they're not tuned in at that particular moment? How are they going to know about the concert? Well, you have flyers, and that's kind of the limitation. So then I come down to the discussion of, this was the original Woodstock poster, and then this is the final poster, and I have information about that, which I found to be quite interesting. And then I enclosed and the thing is that this poster shows a mission statement. 3 days of peace and music. That is a mission statement. None of these have a mission statement. They have a list of bands. They have some things like that on locations, but none of them indicate the mission of the festival. And this does. Now I go, okay, well, so what difference does a mission statement make? This is see how simple this graph is? My reader never has to spend time thinking about this or trying to figure out what this means. I love this simple graph. It just shows if I start with a purpose, a mission statement, this is how that radiates out. And I just thought that was a really great edition. And it was very easy to find and very easy to document. Okay, so there we go, and we have the remaining points of that. And now we come up to the theory. So here's where I want to pause for just a minute, and I just want you to listen to me for just a second. I'll give you something pretty to look at. I only speak for myself and everybody I have ever known who has ever written an essay. There is a period of time in that process where I think, what have I signed on for? I don't even know what I know anymore. I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what I'm trying to prove. Nothing makes any sense at all. And it's a very frustrating period of time in the writing of any kind of argument essay, because I've got to make a point somewhere and I don't even know what my point is. I have researched this thing now for several days. I've listened to interviews and I still don't know how this happened. So for me, for this particular essay, I've got all my facts down. I have all of my the basis for my theory. I have everything but a theory for my theory. So I walked away from it for 2 days. And I came back and I opened up a little Word document. I thought, okay, well, what do I know? Do I know anything about a spiritual component to explain this? And I think, well, okay, well, I know about karma. And so that's where I start. And I'm going to show you how the theory went from there. I know, I'm seriously that lame. So I think, okay, I go to Google and I type in karma just to see. And karma mentions something about the Gnostic Church. I go, okay. So I go to Google and I type in, what is the Gnostic Church? And that brings me to this, which talks about mystical or esoteric insight. Ooh, that sounds interesting. So I type that into Google, and that takes me to the principles of esoteric spirituality. Now we have left the planet, and we are going to have fun. And so I now find out about mystical intuition. Whenever I type in this, it brings up mystical intuition. I love it. So now I find what is mystical intuition. And I find this important information. And then I talk with a friend of mine who has a degree in spiritual philosophy and spiritual psychology of like the masses and why people do what they do in a large group. And of course ours is off the charts large group. And so we talk about the deeper I. So I come back to Google and I type in, what is the deeper I? And that takes me here. And then I type in, okay, mystic spirituality is here. And then here is the deeper I. Now I'm starting to get a formula. You see that? And then I go to, that takes me to Western esoteric spirituality. And I just went, oh, this is just great. And so I'm looking and I'm finding out what these things are, and I'm citing everything along the way because I don't know anything. I know what it is that I've researched, and that's going to give me an opinion after I have researched all this. And I'm looking at different things, and here's the deal. I'm looking through all kinds of articles. And some of them are airy-fairy, and it's like they're just trying to, you can tell when people are just trying to sound smart and lofty. And, you know, I just want a straightforward explanation about what this is. And for example, I filter through those. I still put them in my citations, but I don't really read them because they're just trying to be highfalutin. But I've asked Google the question, what is esotericism? And there is the article by Kenneth Granholm that explains in straightforward dialogue what it is. Perfect. So I look then from there and I go into the deeper I, which I've talked with my friend about. And then I come up with, all by myself, well, there's the deeper I, And then there's the deeper we. And I'm having lots of fun with the deeper we. And I'm building my own ideas based on the research that I did about the deeper I. And now I'm looking at the collective deeper we. Are we not just having fun? It is fun to do this. Okay, so then I go ahead and jot down my theory. The saving grace for Woodstock was the transformative music. And I stopped pretty much with all of that because I could write another 100 pages just on the music and the vibrations and the chords and the words and the timing. And I just had to stop because I'm not writing. If I was writing this as a master's thesis, which I could, I would really go into that music and the vibrations, and I would get all off into the science of vibration and how the vibration reaches the ears and what happens then, but this is not that essay. So I'm staying with my essay, and I came very close to going off that rabbit, off on that little rabbit path. Okay, by Sunday at the festival, it's clear that the announced schedule had gone off the rails. And this is the stuff about Woodstock, and these are the quotes that apply to that esoteric vision. And quotes from those people. So now I've sort of formed the first part of my theory. And then I look at mystical intuition and insight. And this is my final moment. It could be argued that the producers of Woodstock, Michael Lang, Artie Cohenfeld, Joel Rosenman, John P. Roberts, stage announcers Chief Monk and John Morris, and talent coordinator, had one thing in common: inexperience. Though Lang had been involved in the Miami Festival of '68 and had noted the errors that contributed to a basically unsuccessful event, he had never planned for a festival of 200,000 people. With an initial goal of creating an event that would earn profits to be used for a recording studio, Lang's vision changed on day one of the festival. I have his quote about that. I have each one of these producers' quotes about how everything changed on day one. And there we have the rest of my theory, again with quotes. And believe me, when I come to this part of the essay and I'm writing the rough draft, it is so marvelous to have this section already written. And yes, of course, I had to work on it a little bit in the rough draft, but it was all there. And then we come to the deeper I. And I love this part of the deeper I, the connecting the dots. Oh, what a cool thing. What a cool concept. I just came upon that as I was going. And so I put this together. And it says as children, we start with a canvas and we just add one dot to the next, and then pretty soon we can see that we've created a giraffe or whatever. Remember those where you did those little connected dots like in coloring books and things? And so I created this little side-by-side drawing of where the dots connected to make this. I liked it. And then I have, again, the poster. And I know, it's like enough with the poster already, but it's all they had. So with the poster being the only communication point, anyway. So this was another article that I found in all of this, and then I have a nice quote from that. And of course, whenever I don't like to use long quotes ever in an essay because it makes my reader have to stop and read somebody else's words in a longer quote. But this one is important. So if it's important, then 3 or 4 lines is indented, single-spaced, and then this is out of place, of course. The chapter and book would go right here, out standing by itself. Okay. And then this is all the stuff about Matisse, who inspired the poster. More stuff. Shared agreements. Then the spiritual, this is section 3 of that whole spiritual philosophy. And this is the deeper I, which then again goes to the deeper we. And now I've put together a theory that combines different things into a theory of my very own. And that's so much fun to do. I didn't use that, but you can see where I have the end, and a lot of people compared Woodstock and the way it looked afterwards to a war zone. So I was able to cite that picture, and I used that to show this. Then this is after the My Lai massacre, and this is young people in Vietnam. So side by side, it's like this is Woodstock, this is war, and just kind of illustrating what that theory was from somebody. And then, of course, we have the Port of Sandman. And then after I've done all that stuff, here's what comes to me. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the big thing about Woodstock is that it's always been, it could never happen again. It could never happen again. It could never happen again. I've heard it a million times. I don't know if you have or not, but I have. And they've tried. Goodness knows they've tried. They had Woodstock 1999. They had Woodstock. They've tried so many times to recapture the magic of Woodstock. And it just never has been able to happen. But in my afterword, I thought, what am I going to connect this to? And I thought, I'm going to connect this to the younger generation. And at first I was going to do a whole statement about today's young generation worldwide, blah, blah, and that they don't really have any anthems. And I thought, why am I preaching all of a sudden? I spent this whole essay really going into meaningful stuff, and now I'm going to preach to these people? No. So this is what it looks like in the final draft. Here is the section on the theory, and this is what I put together, Western esoteric spirituality. So this was the sections, mystical intuition and insight, that little section. And then we come down to the next section, the deeper I, which we then make into the deeper we throughout this little conversation about that. And then the next section, and there is a spiritual element. And after we've covered all that information, we have the conclusion. And you can see the conclusion has a little problem. We have a little gap issue there. So we want to lay out, we want to take that out. There we go. And we do that by going up here in this little layout tab and going to 0. Because it had just a little bit of a gap problem there. And we're able to see that here. And then after this conclusion, that's where the afterword comes in. This is the last of the conclusion. The afterword is 3 paragraphs, and this is the March for Our Lives, where I say it couldn't happen again. Well, kind of did. And so that's the whole point of this. And now this is our rough draft, and it's time to add the Work Cited to that. Let's go and check out that Work Cited together real quick. I've logged into EasyBib to my project, and under my projects, I'm going to open up Woodstock. As you can see, we have 120 citations. Well, it's a longer paper, and here's my thing. I don't care what you say. You will never see my name on a plagiarism list, because if I opened it and I looked at it, I cited it. If I considered it as something that I might use in the essay, even if I didn't use it, I cited it. So these are all of our citations that have all been added into EasyBib. And again, you do not have to use EasyBib. You could create this list on your own. If you try to do this in Google Docs, on any of the other docs, I guarantee you it will come out wrong. It always comes out wrong on anybody who's ever tried to do this with Google, with any other thing other than EasyBib. Google Docs will mess it up, and every Mac application will mess it up. They highlight stuff. They use live links. You will never have a live link. This one, I wish that we didn't have to have this long URL, but that just, it is what it is. That's where it came from, and if the reader wanted to find it, that's just what it is. Okay, so now we have, I'm just looking to make sure nothing is repeated, because sometimes things get repeated. And while I'm checking this and you're checking this with me, you know, that graph that I created, I got the people at Omni to do that graph for me, and I extracted some research for them on something that they needed. So it was a win-win. And then I went over to Fiverr.com and gave all the information to somebody and paid them $10 to create that graph. I could never have created that graph. It goes off the charts. And so, I mean, it goes off the page. So it was, I wanted to have a nice graph, and I wasn't going to spend time trying to find one. I knew I would never find it. Okay, so there's this. Good, good, looks good. And now we have the most important thing of all, and that is we're going to go back up here to the top. We're going to click Export, and we're going to click Export to Microsoft Word, not to Google Docs. It will mess it up every time. Now, after I've clicked that, there it is in Work Cited. We're going to open it, and that is the most important step, because that makes sure that we have everything all formatted correctly. So you can see that it's thinking, and it's going to open it, and presto, there it is. I'm going to click Enable Editing, and look at it. It's just beautiful. Look how pretty. And we're going to look one more time. You all look with me and make sure that nothing is duplicated. And as I went through, every time I opened something, I just immediately went over to EasyBib and I added it. Those YouTube interviews and the YouTube things that I found, I had to do all those manually, and it's not that hard. It's just boxes to fill out. And some of them they found easily, and others I had to work a little bit. See, that's that Fire Festival. I never did end up using it, but I thought about it, so I put it in. Now, if my committee chairman said take that out, I would take that out, because they would be signing off on that master's thesis if I did it that way. But otherwise, I'm putting it in there. I don't ever want there to be the slightest question about any information that I obtained. Because as you can see, the only thing I started with was that I knew about karma. And we went from there. And this is all the interviews. This is all the... Wait a minute, what's that Wordsworth thing? Why is that on there twice? Oh, it's a different one. Okay. I didn't even use it, but it's, you know, considered it. Okay. And this is that interview that I did with my friend. So you can see that. And I know, I can't stress enough how good I feel when I turn in a paper and I know that there's nothing in there that is not documented. I didn't claim anybody's ideas, thoughts, or quotes for myself. I gave everybody credit. All right, now, good, awesome. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do this. I'm going to go select all. And I'm going to copy. Coming back over here to view. And I'm going to go back to a single page view, because I don't want to mess anything up. Makes me nervous. Even though I have this saved, I always have a thumb drive in my computer where I can save everything. So I save it to my computer. This is a long way to go without a picture. I may have to look at that in a minute. Okay, and I'm going to paste it in right there. Oh, it's gorgeous. Look at that documentation. Beautiful, beautiful. The only thing I have to do before it's all done and I save it as a PDF is I need to look back up here in this section, because we go an awful long time without my reader seeing any kind of information. I know, I was thinking about like Age of Aquarius or something like that for this spirituality section. I don't want to be too sappy. Like I haven't already been sappy in this. It doesn't, you know, but that's what I'm going to do, is look at that. And then I like to just keep a simple header. I don't like my name on the header. Some people do, where it would be Hall 28. I don't like it. I don't like my name all over it. We're not reading about Hall. I just like a simple page number. You do whatever you want. But I just don't. That's just my personal preference. And your style is going to be your style, you all. I'm going to end this. I wanted this to be an hour, and look, we are right at an hour. And the last thing I have to do is, instead of rough draft, we're going to put in the title page. Let's go there. I know I'm disappointed too. I had to get a stock image because I couldn't get permission to use that collage, and I didn't want to make a collage of my own. So the title ended up being Woodstock 1969, a Western Esoteric Spiritual Aquarian Exposition. And originally, Woodstock was going to be an Aquarian Exposition by Debbie Hall, and then this paper is dedicated to the children of the world who must at times follow a drummer to march for our lives. Now, what I would do on this title page, if I was turning this in as an essay, right up here in the left corner, I would put my name, my date, essay, and then I would take all that stuff and those notes. I would add those notes all to the end of after the work cited, and I'd add the outline after the work cited, and I'd give myself credit for every single word. Okay, so that would be what would be going up here. All right, so now we're going to take this, we're going to select all. Select all. Oops, copy. And we're going to go over there to the rough draft, and we delete this, and we paste. And there's our essay. That didn't work, did it? Okay, let me fix this. I'll be right back. And there it is. Title page. And of course, for yours, this will include name, course, information, date, word count, abstract, introduction. Hopefully, lots of space there to look at for a minute, because this is final draft 1 of the last draft. And the only thing I have left to do is proof it one last time, and then add images wherever I needed images to go, and then save it as a PDF so that everything will be held in place. It's a mighty long paragraph there. So I want to check some of these things that look like they're really long paragraphs. I can always see that in this view. There's my works cited. Now for you, after the works cited, you would add your outline. Messy as it is, color-coded, whatever it is, add that outline here. And underneath the outline, you would add whatever note pages you had, like I showed you I had. And then when you had everything up there, that would give you your final word count. So your word count includes every single thing that you've written, and you get credit for those words. Okay, that concludes this tutorial, and I hope you've enjoyed this tour of how to write a theory essay, and how in the end of the theory essay to wrap it to something important or something that's meaningful. Thank you all for watching this, and you'll see the outline and the essay attached as PDF attachments below this video.